So, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Deercast. We're on episode 29, and we're immensely kindly joined by another of our brilliant guests. This is Jon Fisher from Fisher Game Larders. Jon, I'm going to hand over to you and give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what you do. And we always like to hear a bit about your sort of background, what got you into stalking, and yeah, a bit about your sort of early intro to it, really.
Sure, no problem. Well, thank you very much for having me on. It's great to be on the Deercast. I'm a big fan. So you've had some good guests. Where hopefully I'll live up to everybody's expectations. But yeah, a bit of background about myself. I'm from a farming background, farming family in East Yorkshire. We grew up on a small mixed farm, predominantly pig farming, a little bit of arable to support that. And that was my introduction, like many young lads, into shooting world, running around the farm, shooting vermin, rabbits, rats. And then, as it went on, we sort of got into a bit of game shooting and duck shooting and pigeon shooting, all that kind of stuff. And, that kind of passion for it's never left me. It gets ingrained from a young age. So, and I was all sort of set for a bit of a career in agriculture and headed off to Harper Adams. But probably focused too much on playing rugby and drinking beer in my first year, and I'd have some serious questions to answer about whether I should carry on. And it was then that I decided that myself and a lecture theatre were not meant to be. So I jumped ship and I just joined a local engineering company nearby to me that was focused on modular buildings and fabrication work. So it was a bit of a career shift, really, but the farm wasn't really big enough to support me and my dad. So it was thought, right, okay, well let's try something different for a year or two. So yeah, it was then that went into the modular buildings, and then there was the connection later on. It was 2007 when I left that particular industry to set up what I'm doing now, and it was the connection of the engineering, the shooting, the farming background and the modular buildings that was the start of what we know now as Fisher Game Larders of prefabricated larder systems. So, and that was really that short snap of journey of how I got to where we are now, and that was a long time ago when we started the business in 2007. I think the first larder went out in 2008.
Wow. So, that's an immensely kind of like brave jump in terms of to have gone from an employed job to suddenly go, I'm going to set up my own business, doing something that I don't imagine anyone else in the UK was doing in terms of modular refrigeration buildings.
No, none at all. I mean, there was an outfit up in Scotland that had a go at a couple, but basically, yeah. I mean, a lot of people thought I was nuts, because I wanted to have a crack at this, and I'd been involved with a bit of a design project. And the good catalyst for me was after that design project, they asked me if I wanted to, or if I knew anybody who could build this portable deer larder that would work with this client to design it. And I basically said, right, well, yeah, I mean, I designed it. I'll have a go at building it. And they said, right, fine, well, we'll give you a crack. And that was the catalyst for me to hand in my notice and start the business. And it didn't start straight away. We kicked the can down the road for another year, really, on design. So it was a bit of a leap of faith. It didn't go quite how I planned. But eventually we got the order and I set to and built it pretty much single-handedly in an old grain store. Yeah, but as you do, you make do and you scrimp and save and do what you need to do. And yeah, I mean, looking back, 2008, what a cracking time to start a business. I mean, you two are probably too old to remember 2008 and be still in college or wherever. But I mean, it was the biggest financial crash that the world had ever seen around 2008, with banks going bust and massive recession. But somehow we clawed our way through it. And it was a bit of a bumpy time for a few years. There was plenty of challenges and plenty of times where I thought, I must be absolutely crackers, because friends and family, you try and explain what you do, and they're like, what's one of those? What's a game larder? I still hear it now. Some people, they're completely oblivious to it. But we got through those times, and it really started to kick on about 10 years ago, around about 2014, 2015, when we got through those major challenges, and orders really started to flow. So, and that's really where it started to kick off.
And just for the benefit of our listeners, anyone who doesn't know, can you just talk us through the benefits of a modular system rather than having a sort of traditional game larder, and sort of how someone might tack things onto it, and how your customers kind of can do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's pros and cons to all systems of building a larder, but it is quite a complex thing to build when you have all these multiple different trades to come in at the right times, in the right order, and coordinate them all. You're talking 7 or 8 different trades in order to build a larder. And if you take, for instance, building on site, well, quite often, I get asked this question, can you come to our site? We've got a building, we want to convert. And, they send me some photographs on WhatsApp and everything, and it's, the floor's unlevel, the walls aren't straight, the roof's too low, and my classic phrase is they're just full of booby traps, and you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. So when you compare that to, a larder that we build, like off the shelf, off plan, one purchase, no disruption to your site, you keep your building as it was, it'll stand outside. And for that, when you're dealing with a landowner or an estate manager, certainly on the commercial larders, then it's a bit of a no-brainer. So, I mean, cost factors into it. Some of the on-site stuff is quite easy. You can be in and out pretty quickly, but generally, they're the main things when it can be a complex and long process building on site, especially if you're up the middle of Scotland, where you're a long way from resources. But it's one point of contact with us, an order placed. You might not hear from us for 6 weeks, and then it'll be a case of, how's your site getting on? Is it ready? Because we're ready to bring it. Put it on a lorry and take it down there, and that's it. Plug it in, away you go.
And you have to forgive me. Are the units still manufactured in your grain store somewhere, or are they still made in the UK? Are they made overseas? And
we have upgraded from a grain store. We are in quite a big unit now.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're in a new factory now. We came here about 5 years ago, and to be honest, I could probably do with another one. It's getting pretty full. Certainly this time of year, I mean, the season creeps up on everybody quickly. We've got the fallow season and the red deer season in Scotland, all sort of hitting at the same time, and yeah, it gets very, very hectic from now right up to the run up to Christmas. But they're all manufactured here. We do buy materials from Europe. We buy quite a bit of stuff out of Italy. But generally, yeah, all materials are as locally sourced as we can. There's about 15 of us here. A mixture of sort of office and lads on the shop floor. So and quite a few subcontractors as well. So it's a fairly big operation. It's getting to be quite a big beast, and we also do a lot beyond the game and meat industry as well, or the game and shooting industry, should I say. We do quite a lot of butchery units, we do a lot of farm shop schemes. We've got some interesting stuff going on at the minute with mobile abattoirs, which is quite interesting. So we're kind of spanning across quite a few different things as well now. So it's interesting.
And how many of your customers will buy a unit and then come back to you in 2, 3, 4, 5 years time and say, we've got the sort of chiller and maybe like a small unit. Can we now tack on another sort of cutting room and things like that? Is that something that happens quite a lot?
It's not a lot, but it's happening more often. What we have seen out of Scotland is quite interesting. So some of the units that we did early on, around 2011, 2012, when there wasn't the kind of pressure on the deer up there at that time, everything was fairly traditional. But now you've got this almost like eradication program going on, and these estates, what would maybe traditionally shoot 100 red deer a year or 150, their deer counts are off the charts, and they're having to shoot 700 or 800. So the small larder that we supplied, back in 2010, 2011, 2012, around that area, we're trading those back in and selling those on second hand and putting them into much bigger commercial larders, which again is a good advantage for doing it the way we do, because it gives that flexibility. And also it allows people to then consider adding on production rooms and processing rooms, because that is another big part of what we're doing and what we're hearing more of now. I'm probably quoting and building as many venison processing units as we are just standard larders.
Interesting.
So, which is a real interesting shift, and I think it's a good shift, because I think nationally, to really tackle this deer problem, shooting them and putting all that pressure onto AGHEs, it's something we've been doing for quite a few years, and it's not solving the problem. We're doing the same things and making the same mistakes. So I think to create a network of more microprocessors who are then shooting, processing and selling the venison on a more local level, and actually getting more money from it, we're getting a much better return. I think that's a better way of solving the problem. So I think there's a massive drive for doing that venison processing, and people are seeing opportunity. They see an amazing asset that's running around that has value, and it ties in with a hobby, which is deer stalking, and they think, right, okay, well, this is pretty good. We can invest, we can get the right facility, and we can make a business out of it. So, as much as the AGHEs are great and we need them, I do think there's more than enough deer out there for more smaller processors to get more venison on the market. And I find that the smaller ones tend to do a really good job of actually promoting the venison, because they really push it out. They're the ones that do the hard yards. They go to the farmers markets on a wet Saturday morning in the rain, and promote it and push it. They do all the social media stuff on a daily basis. They work hard, they get it into the restaurants. I think those are the ones that are really, pushing and getting and having a voice for it, having a voice for that venison. So I think we need more of them.
I think we've had one of your previous customers on our podcast, Curtis. He probably falls exactly into that category of I don't even know where he'd classify himself in terms of kind of small to medium size game processor, but like you say, sort of really hot on the social media, promoting venison, etc. And I mean, never visited his facility, but from the outside, looks like he's kind of doing it to the absolute sort of pinnacle of what he could do.
Yeah. I mean, he's fantastic at it. I mean, we've been with him from day one, from his first larder, and then he outgrew that in no time. We traded that in, put him into his new processing plant. Then that went from local authority approval up to FSA, and we've just finished another small extension for him now. And he won't stop there. He's got big ambitions, but he's doing it right. I take my hat to him, and we need others to follow, and that's where I think it'll be. And I think it's a classic case. We've got to eat the problem, and the deer are out there. We need more people eating it, more people shooting them. It's interesting that with the deer through the AGHEs, the supply and demand, it always comes at the wrong time. We flood the game dealers when they don't really want it, and then when they do want it, it's out of season. So it's all. Whereas when you try to, you see it from their point of view, you're trying to run, a big meat processing plant where your customers want consistency all year round, like the supermarkets. They want the same product on the shelf consistently all year round. And how on earth can you do it with? It's very difficult with venison when you've got 6 different species. It's all different from bucks to does to stags to hinds, and throughout the year. So it's very, very difficult for them. So yeah, the supply and demand. It's no wonder these HHEs end up with massive cold stores full of venison at the wrong time of the year.
Yeah. And on the slightly smaller end, do you want to talk a little bit about your, is it right to say sort of more recent relationship with Landig, sort of smaller game chillers?
Yeah, I mean, we took on the Landig dealership back in sort of end of March, April, and launched it at the Stalking show, which was great, and it's a great add-on for what we do, because we get a lot of inquiries from sort of smaller recreational stalkers who shoot maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 a year, and I fall into that category. I'm one of those. I don't really dent the national population, but a Landig fridge in a garage is just absolutely perfect, and we wanted to be able to offer it. I wanted to be able to offer something who wants to hang one roe deer or process 1,000, and to have that as an offering is absolutely great. We've just finished a little showroom here at our office, so we've got a few fridges in there. We've got a load of accessory in there, so that looks all pretty good. So we'll keep one or two on stock. But generally, we're getting these fridges out within 2 or 3 weeks from Germany, and they've been selling really well. Yeah, I mean, look back today, and I was surprised how many we have sold. Actually, it just we're always dealing with an order at any one time, which is really good and encouraging.
Yeah, and I think it's really good because I think often within the industry we can be quite disparaging and quite in some cases probably quite dismissive of the kind of recreational stalker. Like you said, that we sort of typically think, well, they're not really doing very much in terms of denting that deer population, so they don't tend to get sort of catered for. When, I mean, if you look at something like the British Wild Venison Quality Assurance Scheme, that was quite clearly kind of, well, you're either a professional or you're not doing it, or you're not sort of factored into this. And I think the Landig allows the people that fall into that bracket, and Harry and I probably fall into that bracket as well, of kind of recreational stalkers, but catering for them and actually giving them the facilities to be able to make a dent in that population if they want to. I mean, the LU 10,000 that Harry and I've got, if you want to, you can fit 4 fallow in it at a time. And I mean, for me in the season, literally 4 fallow will go in 1 week and they'll go out at the end of the week. So you can have a pretty like hefty churn if you really wanted to, but equally you've got the smaller ends of the spectrum where you could literally put 1 roe in it once every couple of months.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the biggest challenges I talked about this weekend, and I do consistently, is chiller capacity. Because that's such a preventative thing. If you haven't got enough chiller capacity or a chiller at all, it puts you off going out stalking.
Yeah.
Like we've got a hot week now. It's the middle of the buck season. They're rutting like hell up here. So everybody wants to be out, but it's still 22, 23 degrees, and that's in Yorkshire, so it is hot. But without it, I mean, I talked to a lot of people over the weekend, and it's like, they might only have storage for 1 deer, but at 9 o'clock at night, they get presented with 3. Only 1 gets shot. 2 and 3 carry on running around. So with the right chiller size, you get that same scenario. Deer 1, 2, and 3 get shot. That's having an impact on the population. Small impacts, but you multiply it by hundreds of times across the country on the same night, then a lot more deer have been shot.
Does make a difference. That really was the trigger for Tom and I to take that for sort of further step and make a bit more of an investment. Like you say, you really don't want to be in that position where you've got the opportunity to take 2 or 3 animals out at once and you can't because you just physically can't store them. There's nothing more frustrating than that being the reason. And
I think the neatest little detail on those Landig fridges is that extension bar, because there's so many people out there who are off put by dealing with a deer once you've got it on the ground. And you talk to people and they're like, I was going to shoot that fallow, but it looked absolutely massive, and I didn't want to deal with it. It was 10 o'clock, and I left it because it was too late and it would take me too long. And I hear that so many times, and those little Landig fridges, that rail, you can hoist it up, get it out your back of your truck.
I'd say everything about the Landig is just so user friendly. Like there'll be times of the year, probably not in the doe season, but probably this sort of time of year, where I'll have mine turned off. And if I go out stalking and I get something great, I come in and you literally flick a switch and it's on and it's up and running and it's down to temperature in a matter of minutes. You don't have to have it running 24/7, which makes it so user friendly from that point of view. You've got the drip tray that you can literally just whip out, hose off outside, shove it back in, and like you say, that rail extension system, and you can winch something up if you want to. I don't know how you could make it any better. It is a really good kind of unit. Really good.
You know, there's some good solid German design behind it, you know, and you know they designed theirs, you know, purely on the wild boar, you know, and that was their blueprint really, right? How do you handle a wild boar? And if it handles those, then it can manage the row and the fallow and even the reds, you know, with those 10,000s. And they've been going really well actually. Those 10,000. I probably had more interest this weekend in the bigger ones than I did any of the smaller ones, to be honest.
Brilliant. We should point out, because people will probably be listening to this podcast in, I don't know, October, November, and they'll be thinking, what weekend were we referring to? And we're referring to the weekend, which is the weekend. We're referring to the game fair, which is the weekend just gone.
That's right.
And poor old Jon is recording this with us a couple of days after the game fair, so I think he's still possibly feeling the effects of a long weekend, or a heavy weekend, I should say.
Yeah, I did completely lose track of day, time, and everything on earlier in the week. I'm still not quite sure, to be honest. You know, when you're at work and you don't know whether it's Tuesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
But we're getting through it. We're getting through it. So, but the long days for us, and I you know, for the traders as well. I mean, we turned up on the Wednesday before the show, so you know, it's always important we get our lorries in early. So Thursday is just manic. You can't move anywhere on a Thursday. So we get our lorries in on a Wednesday, and then we go back with our smaller stuff on the Thursday to set up, and then we pack down on the Monday.
Wow.
So yeah,
it's a shift, isn't it? God.
It's a big old shift, yeah. But you know, you kind of just switch off and get into the zone with it. It's good. It's game fair week. You meet a lot of people. You see a lot of friends. And it was just great that the sun was out. You know, that made it, to be honest. If it had been pouring down with rain, I think I'd have had a bit of a sense of humour failure on many of occasions.
Yeah.
And you've obviously sort of had a bit of an expansion of your business into the sort of smaller stuff this year. Where do you sort of see Fisher going in the next sort of 5-10 years? Where is there a direction of travel that you're sort of aiming for, or?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of the game industry and the shooting industry, I think there's still plenty to be had for us within this, and it's a part of the business that I love doing. You know, when the phone rings and we get that new inquiry, and you talk to, you know, either a gamekeeper up on a traditional Scottish estate, and you can have a half-an-hour conversation about deer stalking. You know, I mean, what's better than that? And then, you know, hopefully they place an order, and you know, a couple of months later, I get to go and see it. So, you know, that's the real plus for it. What we will be developing over the next few years, really, is the other sides of the business on the food projects and the mobile abattoirs. You know, it's the food projects that will be really pushing on, and that will actually encompass both modular builds and on-site contracting as well. So, and that'll cover across a whole wide range of food manufacturing businesses, from meat to fish processing. We've got an interesting inquiry at the moment for a tuna processing plant in the Mediterranean, which would be quite cool. Yeah. So
it's so weird, and this might almost be like slightly insulting for me to say, but I always think of Fisher as kind of like deer and bird larders here in the UK. It sounds really silly now saying that out loud, because of course it must be exactly the same concept, and so it's completely applicable to kind of all sectors of.
Yeah. And we've done we've done quite a few, like fish processing plants. We've done units for units for safari parks. We've done units for fruit and veg people. We've done, and bizarrely enough, one of our biggest projects is actually for a vegan food manufacturer who have quite a large schools contract, and they produce vegan. Well, they call them vegan meatballs, but I don't think they are. But they produce them on a massive scale, and we've been dealing with them now for sort of 5 or 6 years, and we keep going back and adding more modules to it, and more modules, and they're a fairly big beast. And but it's the same concept, you know. It's a food processing environment.
Yeah. And is the market for I suppose the market for sort of venison processing plants is probably quite small compared to the rest of the food market in the UK?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you know, it's like I was saying earlier. You know, we need more microprocessors, but it's a big leap for some people to get into it and invest in it. There's a lot of hard work, and it's a tricky one. It's not like, you know, you can just pick up a supermarket contract just like that and think, oh great, you know, because it's very difficult, you know. This is why these big game dealers find it hard to get these products on the supermarkets. And even the farm deer, I mean, you know, the farm venison market having a pretty torrid time of it at the minute, because these large supermarkets are just saying, you know, there's not the demand there. So, you know, when you're within the shooting industry, you know there's the demand there, you feel passionate about it, and we all eat it, and we all think, well, why isn't everybody eating it? It's just delicious. Why is this not in, you know, in schools? Why is this not being eaten in prisons? Why is this not being eaten in the NHS? And I think it comes down to probably a bit of poor PR, probably wind the clock back, you know, 2 or 3 decades, and you can think about all the other main proteins we have, you know, like beef, pork, lamb. You know, back in the 80s and 90s, they all had these really big PR campaigns, national television, you know, saying, you know, eat British beef, you know, eat Welsh lamb, put British pork on your fork, and all these little slogans. But venison was missed out. It was never even considered. And I think we're playing catch up. You know, we really are playing catch up. And it's just going to take a bit of time. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. But, you know, the people who are in it, the people who are doing it, I think we've just got to keep at it and keep beating the drum. And for as long as people are out there shooting deer, we'll be in business.
So the bit that sometimes worries me is I entirely agree with all of that. And I think someone needs to be out there championing venison. And I'm not saying that kind of the small processors. I mean, let's take Curtis, for example. I'm not saying he's not doing a good job, but there's obviously a limited sort of spread to what he can say. And do we as the industry need to turn around and go, actually, okay, well, all of us will pay, and being from a farming background as well, do we all need to pay some sort of levy to some sort of body that therefore is going to go out and try and do that job for all of us in terms of promoting venison, and just kind of take that on, a bit like how AHDB do for beef and lamb, for example, in farming?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with you. I mean, I think that's where we're not quite on the same page with the other proteins, because they do have this sort of, the AHDB as this sort of almost like governing body, as it were, or a promotional body that sits above all of this and works really hard for it. And I see it from that there's a lot of organisations involved in shooting, and there's been in the last few years various assurance schemes that have all popped up, and they're all a little bit different, and they've all got the little different ideas. But I think if we can find something collectively that encompasses them all, then we maybe stand a bit more of a fighting chance. But I really think that, you know, getting this into, you know, for instance, like no one in the supermarket is ever going to swap a chicken for an oven-ready pheasant on a supermarket shelf. That's just not going to happen. You know, people are not going to suddenly start picking game instead of, you know, a cheap piece of topside in a supermarket. Unfortunately, I just don't think that is the right marketplace for game. It's a bit of a race to the bottom.
Can I ask a question that you may not want to answer?
No, go on.
With all the the assurance schemes, and in my mind I'm thinking of one in particular. Do you ever get consulted on them? Because I would have thought as an outsider, if I was going to design an assurance scheme, probably one of the key people to speak to would be someone like yourself who designs the sort of, I suppose, the bit of the puzzle from an animal being killed to potentially being sold in whatever form. Like that's what you guys do, and that's what you specialise in.
No is the answer to that, and I wish I did, because often we have to react. And if one of these assurance schemes suddenly says, right, we're going to do it like this, then you think, well, that could affect 2 years worth of customers, because we might have to go around and change things. An interesting one was what comes up quite a lot is an external door on a chiller for deer carcasses to go in a throughput, so they don't come back the same way. And it's for an assurance scheme up in Scotland. And some people are in it, some are not. If you're not in it, it doesn't matter. If you are in it, you need it. But when they suddenly add that, technically every larder that doesn't have a door on the side has got to have a door on the side for exit. And that has a lot of implications. I mean, even if you look at all the traditional ladders, that maybe not modular ones, but they might have a stone wall that's 1/2 metre thick. It's just little things like that. And you think, you actually realise what this means to an estate.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of when they keep raising the bar is good, without a doubt. Raising the bar of standards and quality and the way people process deer is really good, and it's needed. But there's still a lot of it's either estates, landowners, or people involved with shooting deer that aren't even at base one, and they're kind of getting left behind, and that investment is coming harder and harder because, 10 years ago they might have needed just a small chiller. Now their deer counts are through the roof, and they need to shoot a lot of deer according to what they're being told, and now suddenly they're facing major investment in larders because, the pressure is there. So, yeah, in terms of the assurance schemes, I can see their intent, but they're not the finished article yet.
Yeah, interesting. And sort of stepping slightly away from sort of larders and Fisher, what's your background in terms of stalking, and how often might you go out and go after a roebuck or something like that? Do you get a lot of time?
Right after this podcast, I'm off. I don't. I mean, I've got a lot of time limitations, but I did turn the year and think, right, it was almost like a New Year's resolution and saying, right, I was so lucky to get so many open invites up and down the country. If I took them all, I'd probably never do any work, because, which would be great. But, I get out a bit, and my ground in East Yorkshire is sort of fairly flat, arable land with a few bits of woodland here and there. But, we've only got roe deer, we haven't got anything exciting. And there's no real pressure on the population, to be honest. So I'm a typical 15 to 20 deer a year on my own ground, freezer filler. Do you know what I mean? And that's what I do. I love eating it. I love cooking it. I love my barbecuing. And yeah, I get out as much as I can, but time constraints with business, family, other bits and pieces. Then yeah, it's one of the things. It's always on my to-do list to do more, but do what I can.
So, $1 million question: at the Fisher household, do you have an all singing, all dancing larder in the garden somewhere, or have you got a Landig in the garage, or what? What's your setup?
Well, I'm quite lucky in the sense that, I only live about 10 minutes from work, and it's in the factory is kind of nestled in between all my bits of ground. So you might recall at the game fair and previously we launched a small modular chiller called the Hunter Larder, and we've got a range of those, and they sell brilliantly for us. So I've got the prototype that we built for that, and the one that we do quite a bit of social media on everything is hooked into our yard. So we've got that all set up here. So I'm lucky enough to have one of our Hunter Larders here, and the first one we built on that. So that's a game changer. So Yeah, I don't take any mess home, which is quite good. I don't take any mess home anymore. Used to be in the garage, but yeah, not anymore. I'm self-contained at work, which is pretty good.
Those hunter larders have been, from what I can gather, been seriously popular amongst people I've spoken to. Because if they're the one I'm thinking of, they're kind of green clad, and there's a kind of outside.
It's like a porch, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, with like a kind of a rail, winch, wash basin section, and then kind of depending on what size you go for, then a kind of chiller beyond that, isn't there?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, well, I'll tell you what sparked that. I was up at one of our larders in Scotland, and it was one that had the winch coming through the front door outside, and it was under a canopy, but the stalker there was, sorry, my phone was just ringing. The stalker there was just dealing with the deer on the end of the winch outside, and everything on it, head off, feet off, gralloching, finishing it off, that was it. And I thought, well, if you can do all that outside on a red deer, surely we can maybe, cut a bit of cost here and almost, instead of calling it a prep room, call it a prep area, and I was like thinking, well, hang on, these stalkers have been out in the field all day, whether it's rain or shine, they come back and really it's a pretty quick process. You get it up on a hoist, get the head off, get the feet off, get it on the rail, tag it, and into the chiller. So it's a little unit that's been able to cut some cost out for us and hit a really good price bracket that it meets people, it meets what people want and it meets what people need. So it's a really simple, no frills, dead easy little larder. So and they do really well for us.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Well, I've enjoyed sort of looking at your Instagram account and seeing all of the slightly far-flung places you managed to take these things to. It must be quite difficult to get, especially some of the bigger ones, some of these larders actually into the, where they need to go.
We do have a bit of fun. I mean, the big ones that go to Scotland, I mean, they're, some of those now are over 40 foot long. They're a great big lump on the back of a lorry, and it's so much easier going down a motorway and you can get it all the way up there. But you start having fun when you pull off at A9 and then you get onto a B road, and then you have really good fun when you go up the estate track. Yeah, we often have people on telehandlers in a bucket going in front of the lorry with a chainsaw, lobbing branches off and doing what they need to do to get this larder in, because by hook or by crook we have to get them in. Touch wood, we haven't failed yet. So it's exciting, and I'll tell you that that's one of the best parts of the job as well. I mean, I do try and go up to as many as possible in Scotland. It's not always the case. Sometimes I have to send one of the lads now, but as nerve-wracking as it can be to watch a big larder that's going down an estate track on the back of a lorry, going up a hill and round tight corners and things like that. But when you actually go to some of these places, you go to some of these estates, it's pretty nice. You can stand in the yards and you can, especially during the rut, you can hear the stags roaring, you see golden eagles flying around. I always leave a site with a smile on my face, thinking, yeah, it's pretty good to do this.
Yeah. So I'm conscious of time, especially because we're potentially holding you up from going off to get a roebuck. So I'm going to ask you a couple of like quick fire questions that for some of our listeners we do kind of a question and answer session amongst our listeners, but actually with you, Harry and I were really selfish and we said we've got so many questions to ask you ourselves, we weren't going to ask our listeners for questions, but I know what some of them will have asked. So first question is favorite caliber.
I'm currently using a 308, but I'm hoping I'm going to start saying 6.5 55 because that's just what I bought.
Okay.
But I've been a bit lazy and not managed to get out to get any ammo. It's ready to go, but I've had to bring the 308 tonight because I just haven't managed to get any ammo. But yeah, I think I'm going to be one of these converted onto 6.5 55 because I think I've heard a lot about it, so I was keen to get one.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
Is that the right answer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big fan.
And if you had to live on one venison recipe for the rest of your life, what would it be? And do you have a specific deer, as in species, that it would have come from?
I I do this a lot with roe fillet because roe is probably all that we eat. But if I had my choice, I'd probably do it with Seeker. But I really like doing like a flash fry fillet in like an Asian marinade. So quite a bit of soy sauce, sesame oil, chili, garlic, ginger, and really give it a bit of spice. Quick flash fry, bang it in the oven for a couple of minutes, and then really thinly slice it. And that for me is, job done. My favourite.
Sounds nice. Sounds very good.
And I think another question that we probably got asked on every single podcast will be what would your advice be to someone who is looking to get into the deer stalking industry?
Get a buddy. Get a buddy. Find somebody who's into it, and find somebody who's willing to share their knowledge. And just try and tag along as best you can. You've got to get into it. I was very lucky when I was younger. I had a good mate of mine who wasn't shy of taking me out, and you've just got to absorb it. You've got to take it in. And the next thing I would probably do is get your firearms application in quickly, because it is a painfully slow process. So I get that in and sit on it, and then spend however long it takes learning, getting out there with other people, watching how it does. And even sometimes you don't need to really go out with a rifle to learn about deer. Just go out with a camera, go and sit and watch them, sit under a tree and watch them, learn about them. And it's just, you'll end up having the best experiences. I certainly do, you guys do. So that would be my advice.
Very sage advice. And another that's burning on the tip of my tongue, if you had if there was a single piece of kit, deer stalking kit, that you think's really changed the game for you, what would that be? Or is there one that you sort of couldn't live without?
The two things are probably the same thing. I would really, really like a really, really fancy thermal. A really fancy thermal. Because I've had to go on courtesies and it's amazing. You can like walk around with that at night. You probably get your way back from the pub and back. It's that good. It's brilliant. But as daft as it sounds, the one thing I could probably do without is my thermal.
Yeah.
Because the chances of me remembering it to go out with it is one thing. So the number of times I've got in a high seat and thought, right, where's my thermal? Oh, it's in the truck. Right, okay. So it's one of the two of the same things really. I think one of them would be on my wish list, but then I could probably live without it just as easily.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I was at a Leica event last week, and they had the new Calinox 2 there, and I'm quite sort of, or had been until that point, very happy with my existing thermal. And I tried their Leica Calinox, and I mean, it's like playing Call of Duty in terms of the clarity and what you can see on it, and everything was just something else. No kind of stuttering in terms of the frame doesn't freeze and refresh itself. It's just something else, and you kind of look at where the technology's gone and you think that's something else.
Yeah. Oh, they're very, very clever now. Yeah, I just want them to come down in price.
Yeah.
Years.
Yeah.
But they're very, very clever stuff. I mean, they do work. I mean, I'd take one out, just a small one, and use it for spotting. But I've got a good set of biners and a decent set of eyes, so that'll do me for now.
Well, Jon, thank you very much. The last thing we want to do is be the ones responsible for you missing a rare opportunity, by the sounds of things, to go and get a roebuck. So you better go and get yourself one now, and send us a picture when you do. But thank you very much for joining us on the podcast, and hopefully we'll catch up with you soon.
No, thanks very much. It's been great to speak about it all. Great stuff. Thank you very much.